I didn't sneeze after all. Hopefully I can get through this. Okay. Where to start? Again, it's the media. The media is just. I can point out a couple of examples during this briefing where the media has just demonstrated itself as beyond incompetent. It's like one question. One of the reporters asked what he quoted some foreign policy think tank person, and I know this foreign policy think tank person. I've seen her do a lot of talks. But he asked the question in such a way that like made it absolutely clear that he didn't watch the briefing that we talked about last night. It's on YouTube. You're a reporter in the White House press corps, and you can't be bothered to watch what the president says when it's available on fucking YouTube? Before you go to the press conference, where you ask a question that he answered in his speech, and we're not like there's no ambiguity here, right? This is like, if 2x is 4, what is x? And then we rewind back and, the president is saying, x is 4 over 2 is 2. Just like no ambiguity, absolutely crystal clear they didn't watch it. How does he get this job? I'll take the job. I'll do a better job than he will. And all these questions about, the war start popping up. And this is actually one of the situations where I think Pretty Boy Josh here isn't answering the way that he should be. Right? And I think it's partly because he's not really. See, he seems to think his idea, or he seems to think his job is to express the administration's position on all of these subtleties, right? And this is what's happening in the Middle East and has been happening in the Middle East for some time now, is actually exceedingly complicated. In some way, it's exceedingly complicated, at least, right? If you want to take a very, very meta position, it's you can sum it up in in a sentence, right? The United States is the great Satan. That's the perfect analysis of the Middle East, right? Meaning that what the United States does is it attempts to create instability by putting off all these different sides against each other, right? So they want the Egyptians to be fighting against the Iranians, and they want the Turks to be fighting against the Saudis, and they want the Israelis to be fighting against the Iraqis, and they want everybody to. They want as many different, cults as they can come up with, and they want them all fighting against each other. Because, as Pretty Boy Josh stated very succinctly in this briefing, when groups are concerned with low-scale local conflicts, they don't pose a threat to us. When you have the Sunnis fighting the Shia, they don't care about America, right? When you have the Arabs fighting the Kurds, they don't care about America. They care about, these trivial concerns that are on the ground, and great, let them blow each other up. That is what the American policy actually is. And it's long-standing. It was picked up by the British. Okay? Like, you don't blame Bush for this. You can blame, I don't even know who. It goes way back, right? Like one of Victoria's advisors, like Gladstone or something, right? But it's the truth of it. It's like way, it's an ancient policy. In fact, it goes back further than that, because I remember reading things about the American Revolution that spoke in similar terms. Well, I mean, in fact, it was the Roman Empire's strategy against the barbarians, right? So, if you really want to go way back, this is an ancient military tactic, and in that region, actually, in fact. The best way to protect yourself. I mean, let's have a thought experiment for a second here, okay? Let's say all the barbarians in the world decided to gang up on America. You think America would really stand a chance? Of course not. They'd stand a better chance than the Romans ever did. But it would still be over pretty quick. And so the Americans, like the Romans before them, must find a way to have the barbarians fight each other. And this is their policy in the region, right? So they want them all fighting each other. The last thing they want is a unified state. The last thing they want is peace. Which is why I keep going back to this statement. This statement by what is he? No, he's not a mullah. It's the Ayatollah in Iran. Because it is the simplest, easiest way to understand it. America really is the great Satan. And that's hyperbole, sure. But if you understand what that means, it's very concise. It's just a very concise way to say something very complicated, right? And how much does Pretty Boy Josh really know? I don't know. He and I have not had that conversation. But he does seem to be a little bit more informed than a lot of the spokespeople I've seen. I think I don't think he's as informed as Marie Harf, but I mean I know Marie Harf was actually an insider, right? She's she's not a PR person, but he does come across better than a lot of. Sorry, I need to sit up. Just a second here. I made sure to get it nice and hot in here, which means that I've got this. I suspect that this actually is real leather. I wasn't sure. I didn't buy it. It was given to me, gifted to me, and I wouldn't really. To be honest with you, I would probably rather have a fake leather couch. It just never really crossed my mind to ask. Which means it gets very sticky when it's hot, and I will stick to it. So I need to ensure that I've got the towel there. I need to get like a blanket or something to put over top of it. Anyways, so yeah, the war. The media doesn't want to explain the subtleties of the wars that exist. I think that there maybe was at some time that they did, and I think Pretty Boy Josh here thinks that the media is still in that era. I've run across this in Canada as well, and it is just I find it remarkably frustrating. Right? Because I found the position that the Liberal Party in Canada has taken to be very, very clear. But it has a couple of clauses in it, right? And so the media keeps, like they can't understand because it's not binary. The media wants to break all war down into a moral issue. They don't want to talk about tactical considerations. They don't want to talk about, resources or anything like that. Which is what they should be doing, right? It's almost a role reversal. The way that this discussion should be going is that the government should be trying to create a binary moral choice. And the media should be, pushing back against it and trying to get details and make it more complex, flesh out the subtleties, all these sorts of things, right? Instead, it's the other way around, where the government is trying to broadcast that this is a complicated thing that we can't understand using base moral terms, and the media is just trying to reduce it to this black and white issue. And it does that because it knows that that's, it wants to polarize its audience and then sell for one or the other. Because it doesn't want to sell issues, it doesn't want to sell facts, it wants to sell identity. And so the media wants to break all wars down into two, what's the word I'm looking for here? I can't find it, but two cartoonish representations of reality. Right? On one side, you've got Gandhi, and on the other side you have Napoleon, and there's nothing in between. Okay? There are only two positions on war that you're allowed to take in the media. Either you're opposed to all war on moral grounds, all conflict is illegitimate, or war is, meant to, push democracy and give people freedom, and therefore all war is justified on the basis of it protecting someone or winning somebody's rights. You can be Gandhi or you can be Napoleon. The word I was looking for was caricature, and these caricatures are the only things that exist. There is no midpoint. And what doesn't help is that the last administration, the Bush administration, played into that, right? They took this Napoleonic position and they tried to cast away all their opponents as Gandhis. To the point that a lot of people thought they were voting for fucking Gandhi. Even though Obama said from the start, no, I'm not an anti-war candidate. I never was. I don't want to be. And it's the media's refusal to try to engage in any kind of subtle discussion, to broadcast any kind of complicated analysis, to present a sentence with any kind of a clause in it. That has broken public opinion down into these absurd extremes. And then when you get somebody saying, well, we don't think it's a good idea to get too involved in Iraq, but we think this situation is an extreme circumstance, and maybe there's this other circumstance too, then their attack is inconsistent. Because they're not conforming to either of these caricatures. So why is the media doing this? Because they know what sells. And they're going to take, well, there's two reasons, right? One is that they want to polarize people, work them up, I'm on this side, that side's the bad guy. Let's do the fighting, right? And overall, I don't want to push any bipartisan nonsense, right? I'm not opposed to conflict in politics. I'm a leftist. I think that all politics is fundamentally conflict, and that when you remove the conflict, you're removing the political discourse. You can't have if there's no conflict, there's no democracy, right? Except that sometimes, in order to develop a meaningful conflict and a meaningful discussion, you have to be a little bit more subtle, right? I mean, let's pick sides, sure, but let's pick sides that exist in reality, not caricatures, not fantasy choices, right? But I mean, there is that aspect, right? That you have the liberal magazine has the liberal readers and they want a liberal perspective, and similarly with the conservatives, right? But there's also the basic reality that people don't want to think too hard. And so anything that is particularly complex, you lose ratings, right? It's boring. And with the print media, you're dealing with the reality that majorities of people can barely read at a grade 10 level. So even if they were able to take the position that the administration is trying to present and write it down and articulate it well and publish it, the audience that would be able to understand it is too small to generate a profit from. And so the only places you can get fact-based analysis in the media are specialist papers and academic publications. Anything written for the open market has to be broken down to a grade 10 level. You know, the New York Times is written at a grade 10 level, right? It might be grade 11. Because there's no market. Right? And you got poor pretty boy Josh here trying to, explain the reality of things, in this, subtle kind of way. You've got clauses in a sentence, it's like, okay, there's this, but there's also that, and the media is just like, okay, but is it 1 or 0? Is war always wrong, or is it always right? And he's confusing them with simple arguments that they can't put into their little boxes that they have been told is their media institution's mission statement. The White House departments, the people that they send to the White House are far worse than the people that get sent to the State Department. I will hopefully have more substantive responses for the State Department briefings, but I do unfortunately think that a lot of the responses I'm going to get in the White House briefings are going to be diatribes against the media. As much as I don't like the political class, the media is worse, right? If you want, like, who is less trustworthy, who is more evil, who do I, who do I think has less altruistic motives? Journalists are worse than politicians by a good margin. Because while the politicians are often trying to find ways to justify things or get public opinion on their side or whatever else, the media is constantly seeking to obfuscate things to confuse people. The politicians seek to rationalize, sure. Okay, but it's only the media that will balls up and lie to you. So enough of that for right now.